This Slammiversary and iMPACT Wrestling review was brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Try it, and the next time TNA are doing something interesting with the knockouts, they won't ruin the segment by adding the beautiful people to it. Okay, sorry for the delay on this one. I was feeling sick on Sunday night and I ended up going to bed early. Wasn't feeling so hot for a while. I saw the pay-per-view a few days late, so I apologize if you were expecting a normal review from me, but I'm a little behind the 8 ball on this one, so I'm just going to give you guys my brief thoughts on Slammiversary and then just move on to iMPACT. Well, I didn't need to retweet anything from the TNA Twitter account to know that they were going to stick the X Division in the curtain jerker spot like they always fucking do. And this ladder match was exactly what you'd expect from an X Division match with no build-up whatsoever. A big car wreck spot fest with no story, and that's it. It was fun to watch, and there were some nice bumps. Especially the Davey Richards bump, holy shit. The match could have used another 5 minutes or so, but they busted their asses for the time they had, and they delivered a really fun match. It's just a shame that we all knew TNA was going to forget about it 60 seconds after it was done. Joe versus Lashley was pretty solid. Very little build-up here, so you couldn't really expect an epic encounter. A few more near falls would have helped this a lot, I think, but not a bad match by any stretch, even if it did feel more like a TV main event than a pay-per-view match. I wasn't wild about the finish, personally. I get that TNA want to protect Lashley, and I understand why, but you've got one guy who connects with the audience, and another guy who doesn't so much. It just feels again like TNA aren't really getting it with Samoa Joe, but I guess they did need at least one heel in the main event, so it's not the end of the world. Magnus versus Willow. This one really needed more near falls. It felt like the match was just starting to really heat up, and then all of a sudden it was over. It seemed like Willow was beaten really easily, too. He hadn't even taken that much punishment. I was expecting him to kick out and the match to go a while longer. The match ending when it did felt very premature to me. But it could have been a lot worse. I was expecting a ton of overbooking with Bram and Abyss, but they kept it within reason, so thank you. I'm glad Magnus went over. He really needed to go over. Although the psychology here was fucked up. They say this is the new badass Magnus, but then he wins the same way he won when he was paper champion Magnus, with interference and help from other people. Still, he did look stronger here than he did during most of his world title run, so I guess we can still count this as a step forward for Magnus, albeit a small one. So this year's Hall of Fame inductees are Team 3D. Okay, whatever. I don't put much stock in Halls of Fame. I think TNA having their own Hall of Fame right now is kind of ridiculous, but 3D certainly deserve to be in there, so fine. Austin Aries versus Kenny King, thumbs up on that. Again, very little build-up here, so they were just doing what they could in a match that was set up very quickly without any real context or backstory to it beyond Kenny is on MVP's team, and Aries is opposing MVP's team, so let's have the two of them fight. I admit I was expecting a little more out of this one. I know these guys can deliver more, and I'm sure we would have gotten more if Aries had not been working double duty that night. Still, they didn't half-ass it or anything. The brainbuster off the top rope finish was really cool. Solid match. Well, now we know why TNA didn't book the Wolves against the Von Erichs, because they wanted someone the hometown boys could get over on and give the live crowd a treat. The bromance mean basically nothing, so it made sense to use them in this case. I thought Ross and Marshall did alright. They did look pretty nervous and green out there, and the match wasn't anything amazing, but it didn't really need to be because it wasn't about that. This whole Von Erich segment was more about just popping the crowd and helping sell tickets for the event. And it did, as I understand it, so I guess this all worked out. They had close to 4,000 in attendance, the crowd loved the Von Erichs, and I marked out when Kevin hit the ring and broke out the claw on Jesse Goddard. That was a great moment. Gail Kim versus Angelina Love was okay when it wasn't being overbooked, but they were going to have to do a lot more than that to make me give a crap about this. Enough already with the crooked referee shit. This garbage with Stifler is so old and repetitive and tiresome and lazy. For crying out loud, do something new and different with the beautiful people and this feud, or don't even do it in the first place, because we've seen this all before. Angelina wins due to the exact same shenanigans we've been seeing for weeks. Her boring-ass title reign continues, and I honestly could not care less. If Taryn Terrell shows up on Impact Thursday and wins the title from her, that would be just awesome. You know, I was enjoying the EC3 Bully Ray Texas Death Match until Dixie Carter came out. I thought the pacing slowed down too much when Bully started tearing up the ring, but they were having a fun encounter here. It was good. I was liking the story they were telling. The bump on the broken glass was cool. But then Dixie showed up, and all the focus shifted away from them and onto her, which meant that in the end, TNA took a match that could have been used to benefit and elevate EC3, and instead used it to put more attention and more heat on Dixie Carter than anyone else. And even though EC3 won an enjoyable match against a real badass in Bully Ray, I'm not sure how much this really did for him, because ultimately the whole thing was about Dixie and Bully Ray. The guy is going to have to shine on his own at some point, and I don't know if that's going to happen as long as he has to share the spotlight with Aunt D. Just something to think about, TNA. Storm vs. Anderson was fine while it lasted, but pretty short. And for a feud that was never really about anything in the first place, that didn't bother me so much. It seemed like this whole thing was just done to involve the Dallas Cowboys and get some TMZ coverage. It accomplished that, so good. The EY Lashley Aries cage match was a fine way to end the show. This was probably way better than EY MVP would have been, so no complaints from me. The match was solid. The last couple minutes were really good. A strong main event that wasn't ruined by needless overbooking. I enjoyed it. I hope TNA were listening when Aries was getting cheered against EY. Not much more to say about it, really. Overall, I thought Slammiversary was a pretty solid pay-per-view that deserved better build-up than it got. It wasn't perfect, but it was good. And it didn't frustrate the piss out of me like a lot of TNA's recent pay-per-views have, so I'd say they did a good job on this one. Granted, some of this will probably depend on how they follow it up on Impact, where apparently Dixie has invited Tommy Dreamer to the show. I don't know why. I don't particularly care why. But if Dreamer's there, I imagine there will be a lot of crying involved. Can't wait. Wow. What a difference a week makes, huh? I don't know if I have too much to say about this Impact. That's kind of what happens when the show only really has like 6 segments. It looked like TNA were experimenting with the formatting this week, structuring the show a little differently. Add that to them being out of the Impact Zone again, thank Christ, and a couple divisions getting a fresh coat of paint here, and it looks like TNA were making an effort to change things up this week. And that's good to see because God knows they needed to.
Oh, you were not aware of this?
Believe it or not, the first hour of this show only really covered 2 segments. And when your opener is set to go for half an hour, you really need to be careful or this could start to drag so easily. But they avoided that here. They addressed Slammiversary, they had an opening match, and they set up MVP's dastardly plan for the rest of the night. So really it was more like 3 segments in one. And I think that's why I didn't get bored with it. And I think this may have been necessary too, because a lot of this seemed to be devoted to them course correcting, because MVP's injury probably forced them to change directions. My guess is he was set to win the world title, which can't happen now obviously, but it's funny how things work out, because I think them being forced to take this new route instead may end up being more interesting. MVP's plan was basically the same as it was before, stacking the odds against the babyfaces, playing them against each other to weaken them. Before that felt ineffective to me as pay-per-view hype, but here I thought it worked because, number 1, we're not in hype mode right now, and number 2, it actually accomplished something this time. You had the Wolves defending the tag titles in a triple threat. Really fun tag match, by the way, and they gave it a great amount of time. I mean, almost the whole second segment was devoted to this. They went over like $1 million, pinning Jeff Hardy 100% clean. And think about that for a minute. They could have pinned anyone in that match. But instead of Samoa Joe, Austin Aries, or Abyss, Davey Richards pinned Jeff fucking Hardy. Yeah, how about that, huh? A couple years ago, that would have been unthinkable in this company. But the Wolves have a great match. They get over on the biggest name star in the match, only for them to have to go back to the ring later and wrestle again where Bram and Magnus are the ones to get heat on them. Using the established guy to enhance the homegrown talent, not going overboard to protect the established guy at the expense of the match, finally doing something to refresh the tag team division, the bromance being nowhere in sight. You know, this was great. I don't have a single complaint about any of it. And yes, that was half the show right there. The Bram and Magnus stuff came later on, but basically, yeah, half the show. And you'd think this would really be dragging by that point, but the fact that it wasn't says a lot about how well this episode was paced compared to some other recent offerings. Oh, God. I cringed when I heard that Dixie Carter had invited Tommy Dreamer to this show. A storyline between an authority figure and a middle-aged backstage agent? Sounds riveting. Seriously, if this is leading to EV 3.0, then just fucking kill me now, okay? Because no one wants to be reminded of that shit. And I'm sorry, Tommy, but the same goes for that Hardcore Justice pay-per-view.
I'd rather get a high colonic with a hot poker.
Now, I will admit, this was actually a very good segment. Not only did Tommy manage to keep the tears in his head for the most part, but he pretty much said everything to Dixie that the internet has been saying for months. That her whole persona comes off like she's becoming a mark for herself, and it's taken away from the product and blah blah blah. That was pretty damn cool. Dixie kneeing him in the balls was funny, though I really hope this is not leading to a Tommy Dreamer EC3 feud, because the hardcore American icon of wrestling deserves much better and we all know it. Yes! So taken on its own, this was a really good and effective segment, with TNA using Tommy to address a lot of their recent criticisms. But does it signify anything more than that? Probably not. We've seen plenty of work shoots like this over the years where TNA like to show the audience that they're aware the fans don't like this or that, but then they don't do anything to change it. It's like they're saying, yeah, we'll throw you a bone because we know you think there's a problem, but we don't see it that way. It made for an interesting exchange here, but does it mean that any real changes with the Dixie character are on the way? I doubt it. Sweet merciful crap. Taryn Terrell is back, and not a moment too soon. Hallelujah!
Yes! 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 Yes!
Hot damn. Finally, a Knockouts feud to get excited about. And I was so happy with the way TNA presented this. Gail Kim introduced Taryn like a big star. She came off like one. The audience treated her like one. They talked about their feud last year like it was a huge deal and made the rubber match they want to have now seem like a must-see event. I thought this was fantastic. But then the beautiful people came out and the segment got boring.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid I've got some bad news.
Ah, for crying out loud. Velvet, Angelina, we finally got something interesting going on with the Knockouts. You two have not done anything even remotely interesting since you got back together months ago. This does not concern you. You have no business here. Go away.
Now forever leave my presence. Leave this ring, leave this building, leave the state. I think you should be exiled from the United States of America.
Needless to say, I was very happy to see the beautiful people get disposed of so easily. But TNA, listen. You finally have a Knockouts feud that generates some real interest, some actual buzz. I'm begging you, when Gail and Taryn have their tiebreaker, please, just leave the beautiful people backstage. I swear I mean this more than anything. Don't let them get within 100 fucking yards of that match, because there is nothing, I repeat, nothing they can contribute that will do anything other than take away from it. Do what you did last year, okay? Don't overcomplicate it. Just let Gale and Taryn do their thing, and we'll all be much, much happier for it.
Oh, my brother, testify!
In keeping with MVP's previous methods actually accomplishing something this time, we have our main event of Eric Young versus Bobby Lashley for the world title, where anyone who could possibly help Eric has been removed from the building. If they were going to switch the title, why on earth would they not just do it at Slammiversary? They could have done the title change there, gave the pay-per-view buyers a little more bang for their buck, had this be the rematch, and it would have worked the same way. I don't know.
This is unbelievable. This doesn't make any sense.
TNA had to do something here. They had to. EY was not drawing as the world champion. Viewership for his main events was getting downright scary, so they had to get the belt off him. I don't know how much of a better option Lashley is. I always felt like TNA thought he was a bigger deal than the fans did, but they didn't have many options here, and I'll take Lashley as the champion with MVP as a mouthpiece over MVP as the champion, which was most likely the original plan. I think this is probably a step up from EY as the champion at least. I don't know if it really excites me or anything, but the return of Bobby Roode excited me. That was an awesome moment. TNA turned Bobby Roode mega babyface here. The crowd went nuts for him. That was a tremendous ending to the show. If the plan now is to do Lashley versus the newly minted babyface Bobby Roode at some point, I'll watch that. It seems to put the kibosh on the Beer Money reunion, but I thought this was pretty fucking cool nevertheless. For me, this was easily one of the most enjoyable impacts of the year. It's amazing what a difference getting out of the Impact Zone makes. Plus, all the matches and promos were good. There was no bromance, no menagerie, no stupid stuff. Something actually interesting happening with the knockouts, the tag division getting a boost. I don't know if they'll be able to keep this momentum going for long, but I was more than satisfied with this one. So, good job, TNA. Good job.